Hi, this is Mark Slade with the Mark Slade Homes team at Keller Williams. And it's, the half yearly mark. And so we like to prepare an evaluation of what's going on around in the general area, which we like to call the train towns of New Jersey, where you usually have a reasonable commute of 45 minutes or so into Manhattan. So we've got about 18 towns here, so hopefully you'll be patient. But let's flash the cards. So Berkeley Heights, pretty consistent, a little bit more in units sold this year. Price is almost the same, even though it's a tiny bit less. Asking is a little bit less. And days on market's a little bit longer. So that's an interesting number to see because Berkeley does have a train station, and the results that are closer to town are very different. The Caldwells. So this would be North Caldwell and Caldwell. Average price is up a bit. Okay. Percent over asking, not as high. Days on market is higher, but the units sold is more than double. So that's interesting to see. Chatham. Okay. And in Chatham, we have obviously an average price that's kind of holding firm. Units sold is up a bit. Percent over asking is 8.5%. It's a little bit less than last year's 9.7, but we can deal with that. But days on market once again lengthening there. Cranford heading into Union County. So this is a little bit of a surprise to me that the average price is so much lower, and yet the unit sales are so much higher. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. And again, days on market is slightly higher. East Hanover, also in Morris County. So kind of holding firm. Units sold are up substantially, more than double. But the percent over asking is not as far down as half, but it's down significantly from where it was last year at this time. Florham Park, pretty similar in a sense. Average price over asking is down. That is by more than 50%. And average price is holding firm for the most part at 1147 versus last year's 1151. Unit sales are not as high up, but they definitely are significantly up higher by about a third. Glen Ridge, well, yep, this is one of those two craziest markets in the area that we track. So as you'll see, the average price is almost 1.6 million, which is up basically a third from where it was last year at this time. Units sold down, and that's because again, no inventory. Percent over asking, 27.8% over asking. That's pretty substantial, guys. And days on market is less. So this is the first town we're seeing with less days on market this year than last. Kenilworth heading back to Union County. Price is up a little bit. Units are more than double, but the percent over asking, not really what we would hope to see. It's dropped down to 1% over asking, and days on market has continued to increase. Livingston. So this is a market that always is besotten with a significant number of exclusives. And as you can see, the percent over asking at 1.9% is likely to be very reflective of the number of exclusives in Livingston. Days on market is more than double. Units are up, and the average price is also up nicely to 1.409. Madison. So Madison, New Jersey, flipping back to Morris County again. So average price is up to 1558. Percent over asking 8%. Units sold 66 versus last year's 38. And days on market's increasing. So we're going to have to keep tabs on all of those types of trends. Maplewood, of course, my home market. So according to the results we had as of the end of June, beginning of July, units were pretty much almost the same as last year. Average price was up to 1252. That's a 20% increase in average price over last year. Percent over asking was 15.1% versus the prior year of 14.5. I can tell you that has climbed to 17% in the last few weeks in July. And then days on market, that was up surprisingly, but it has been dropping. Millburn. Millburn's interesting market. So we've showed 98 homes sold versus 26 through the same period last year. Average price is 2.4 million. And that's a huge increase over last year. So what we're saying probably is a huge shift in what's going on in Millburn. Percent over asking is only 3.5%. We recently sold a property for 17% over asking in Millburn. Montclair, usually the coveted crown, although Glen kind of, steals it away. Average price is 1478. Last year it was 1454. Units sold up slightly. Percent over asking 22.4%. Days on market 21, which is up from last year. New Providence, average price of 1270, which is 20% plus over last year's average price at this time. Percent over asking was nice, 10.7%, and units sold was up almost 50%. North Caldwell, we talked about this a little bit earlier, more specifically 1327 versus 1291. Average price over asking is 5.9% versus 6.3%. And units sold, a touch up from last year. Orange real estate, where we recently just put a contract property for more than double the average price on Berkeley. The average price actually is down this year versus last year. And the percent of our asking is also significantly down this year versus last year. And the days on market is more than double. So not sure why, because Orange has been a pretty strong market for growth. We certainly experienced it with our listing, but I don't know why it's showing so much of a decline, with the exception of the fact that there's been twice as many units sold this year than last. Roseland heading back up to northern western Essex. Average price is up pretty nicely to 936. Units sold more than double. And let's call the percent over asking is kind of similar, 4.1 versus 4.5. South Orange, our sister Soma Town, they're up to an average price of 1176, so that's about a 10% increase over last year. Percent over asking is 14.8%, which is very healthy and up versus last year. Days on market, I think that stat might be wrong, so I apologize. Units sold 77 versus 63. Springfield, New Jersey, where we just listed a property on Mizell. Average price is down, and that's a pretty significant drop off. Units sold is just a little bit up from last year, so about 10% higher than last year. Percent over asking is similarly down, as is the average price, and days on market more than double. Summit Real Estate, another crown jewel in the bedroom communities of New York City. Average price is down a little bit to 1.75 million. Units sold dropped a tiny bit. Percent over asking also dropped a tiny bit from 10.2 to 8.9%. Union Real Estate, right next door to Maplewood. Average price is up to 587 from 575. Percent over asking, not as up. 3.3 versus 5.7. Days on market are clearly higher, but the units sold are dramatically higher. So there's definitely a lot of activity in Union. West Caldwell. So West Caldwell, average price is now 814, 9.8% over asking. And units sold versus last year, 36 versus 34. West Orange, which has always been a strong market, and part of what I like to jokingly call SOWOMA, for South Orange, West Orange, Maplewood. So units sold up dramatically to 201. Average price 762 at this point in time versus 705. So that's a nice healthy 8 to 9% increase over the previous year. Percent over asking, not as high, 7.8%, at least at the time of this report, but I will tell you that it has now climbed to over 10%. And that, guys, is your wrap. I hope you enjoyed listening to these stats. If you'd like something more in detail or like to know how much your home is worth, please feel free to reach me at 917 797 5059. Thank you very much. This is Mark Slade from the Mark Slade Homes team at Keller Williams.